Alright guys, welcome to MPC Scripting for Dummies. We are actually taking a request today to go over Euphy Quest Shop MPC. I'm going to go over through all the information regarding this script, line by line, code by code, and we're going to see exactly what this script is doing and how it works. So, needless to say, let's jump right on in. So the first thing you have on any script usually is going to be a bunch of comments. These comments are usually done by the person who made the script. Preferably, don't delete this stuff, man. People work really hard on their scripts. Give them credit when credit's due. So this script was done by Euphy, so we are going to give him credit for this script. And what I'm going to do is actually just walk you through how it actually works. So the first line, you get down here, is the first MPC. This is the actual only MPC that he loads, and this is the actual visual part of the MPC. Everything else is back-end code. So this is the only thing that you actually see. This is the only thing it actually does. This call function does a few things. I'm going to write down how it works. You can do call function Q shop. You can pass in arguments if you choose to. You can do 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2. You can call Q shop with nothing in it. You can do call function shop Q shop 1. However you want to do it. And what this does is basically, with the dynamic shop system that it created, you can load particular shops for one MPC. You can load all shops. This is all shops. This is shop 1 and 2, and this is only shop 1. So you can change it to basically show exactly what you want in each MPC. You can duplicate the MPC if you want. So for instance, let's say you want this one in Frontera, this one in Morocco, but in Morocco you want to show just this particular shop, you can. So that's basically how this script is functioning. We're not going to go too much into this yet, but I just want to give you a heads up. That's what QShop does. So it does take a number of arguments, and those arguments are the shop indexes. And we're going to get to that in just a little bit. So let's move on down to the script core. This is pretty much the body of the script. Everything that happens is done through this Quest Shop core. And there's a lot to it, so we're going to take it little by little. So the first part, you'll notice it's a floating MPC. It's loaded into the server, but it doesn't appear anywhere. It's just there for calling, and we're going to get to that in a little bit and what it does. So the first part is the function declarations. These are 3 functions that are used within declarations. These are 3 functions: add, check, and slot, and I'll explain what these do real quick. This one will add an item to the shop. This check is simply a comparison whether or not A is greater than or equal to B, or it might be the other way around, A less than or equal to less than B, I don't know. But it's basically a small comparison. That way you can pass in an argument 1, check it against argument 2, and return back basically true or false. I believe actually check, this particular function returns a color, so they can actually determine if you have that item or not. So it returns red or green, and then it sets a variable if you don't have the item, and it stores it on the character. Last one is the slot. Excuse me 1 second, get a drink of water. The slot basically just returns either the item name, or the item name with slot next to it. This way you can see if the item has slots or not. I mean, nothing fancy. So those are the 3 functions that are doing, and we'll go into those more later on. Next part, on init. This is, of course, when the MPC loads. This is either on a server restart or at reload script. Basically, whenever you have to reload the MPC, this on init is the first thing that fires on. And so everybody should be familiar with on init if you're at this part of the section anyway. Free loop. This is a really cool function. Free loop, back then or even now, there's an infinity check array when you're looping through an array. So if you are hitting, I think it's 500 plus, it basically freaks out and says, hey, you're about to do an infinite loop, let's kill the script. It stops it from pretty much hammering the server. However, if you know you're going to be looping through a bunch of stuff, You can turn free loop on, and this lets it continue the loop until everything's done. This way you can go through all your big stuff without actually worrying about it killing the script. So all this does is disables the infinite loop check. And you can do both, either free loop 1 or free loop true, and that will do the same thing. Next are some basic variables. We're not going to go into these at all. If you don't know how to do variables by now, please visit my other videos, because this is fairly simplistic stuff here. He already explains exactly what each one does, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Next, this is a simple array. This is pretty much a lookup array. What it does is, if we're using cache points, it knows exactly what the cache points variable is to apply the cache points to itself, and it knows that the word to display is cache points. So you're good there. So we'll make sure you know what this means. So this means points $0 equals the value cache points, and of course the other version, points $1 equals cache points. And we're putting the arrays here because we're going to be using these arrays quite often. So I'm putting the actual arrays and what they equal for each index of the array, so you know how it's pulled. And again, this one starts at 0, so the first index point is 0. Next, we go to the very important shop script. This is used quite often and used pretty much everywhere throughout the script. So the shops, if you notice, the first thing that stands out is that they start at 1, which means the shops array. Array. Autocorrect. Array. That means .shops $1 equals headgears. .shops $2 equals weapons, and .shops $3 equals other. So this is very important to know, and the reason being is because we're about to use these in the next function. So these are the shops you can load. You can create any other shops you want if you want to have more, whatever. And then you would have, shops 4 first equals more, and then shops 5 equals whatever. Now, we're not going to use these two. I'm just putting them in here so you can see what they would look like. But that's basically how it works whenever you add more to the array. Next, we go down to this really, really nifty function. It does a lot, and it's very complicated a little bit. So I'm going to kind of go over how it works. The first part is the add function. This adds an item to the shop. And these shops, just so you're aware, if you go to the very bottom of the script, there's 5 shops that are loaded by dummy values. Again, we're only using the first 3 because we're not using more or whatever. So what happens is this QShop1 is the same as the index that matches your first shop, 1. So QShop1 is going to handle your headgears. QShop2, I'm going to put that here, QShop1. QShop2 is going to handle your weapons, and QShop3 is going to handle your other ones. We're going to go ahead and now get rid of whatever and more because, again, we're not using them. Just wanted to explain how that worked. So as you notice, we're only using shop 1, 2, 3. So down here we don't need shops 4 and 5. We just need 1, 2, and 3. If we add another shop, another element to that array, we would create a 4th shop. It just goes by the array index. Again, this is why this part is important, and knowing your array index is important. And again, you wonder, why didn't this start at 0? Because we pushed it and started at 1. Okay, so now that we know that our shops are QShop1, QShop2, QShop3, our indexes are 1, 2, 3, we can go down to the add function. The add function is going to simply add an item to the shop. So the first part is you see all the variables that it's requiring. The first one is the shop ID. The next one is the reward ID. So that's shop ID 1, index 1 up here. Reward item, you're going to get a 5022. You're going to get one of those for 1 exchange. It's going to cost you 0 zenny. It's going to cost you 0 points, cash points. And the next part is a key value pair. A key value pair, if you're not familiar with key value pair, is basically a combination of 2 things. A, the first item, and B, the second item. So each one of those is a key value pair. These are together as 1 unit. So 7086, you'll need one of those. 969, you'll need 10 of those. 999, you'll need 40 of those. 1003, you'll need 50 of those. And 984, you'll need 2 of those. So by using the key value pair and using them at the end, we can basically take as many as we want until the function runs out of arguments if we really wanted to. So we'll get to that later. Another thing he states is do not use a reward item more than once. This is actually incorrect. You cannot use a reward item more than once in the same shop. And I'll show you why later. But what it is that the variable that is created to manipulate where all this data goes actually contains both the shop and the reward item ID. So if you had the same one in 5022, you would actually just overwrite the last one and only the last one would work. But if you put 5022 in shop 2, then the variable would change because it would have a shop ID of 2. Again, we're not going to go into that just yet, but that's just more of an example. So since this is shop index 1, and we know it's headgears because it's shop index 1, we know all these down here belong to the headgear shop. We know all these down here belong to the weapons, and all these down here belong to the other. Because, again, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. These are the item IDs that are rewarded. We don't care about those right now. Those can be anything you want. Again, the number of items you get is 1. How much zenny it costs, how much cash points it costs, and the items required to retrieve it. Again, we'll go into those in a little bit. So let's go look at that add function. It's a very nifty function. We're going to scroll down until we find it. So give me 1 second, and I'll go find it for you. Excuse me. Alright, so we're down the script at line 200, right in the middle. We found the add function right here. Okay, so this add function does a lot of neat things. And remember, let's go ahead and put the arguments that this function takes. So the first one is get arg0. And if you remember, the first item we got was the shop ID, or the array index. We're going to call this array index of .shops, because that is the index. Same thing as the shop ID. Get arg1 was the reward item. Reward item ID. Get arg2 was how many? How many reward items? Right? Let's get items. Get arg3, how much is any? Get arg4, how much cash points? Okay. Then we have arguments get arg5 to get arg question mark, because we don't know how many items it's going to be. It doesn't really matter. I'll show you why in a second. These are required items plus required amount. All right. So the first thing this function does is it checks to see a get item name get arg1, which is the reward item, equals null. And null is if it's a string. If it doesn't exist, it returns null. The reason for this is simply because he wants to make sure that the item ID that you said was going to be rewarded actually exists. So this is simply a check. Does the reward item actually exist? Because if it doesn't, stop. Right? All right. Next, we're setting a temporary NPC array, a numeric array. Excuse me. And we're storing a bit of information in here. We're starting at 0. So this is going to make, we're going to say .@j properties, and we're going to say .@j0 equals get arg2, which is how many reward items, right? Number of reward items. .@j1 equals get arg3, which is how much is any, and .@j2 equals how much cash points. So we're storing this in a temporary variable, and we'll show you why in a second, but we're basically just storing information here to push it to somewhere later. So we're just storing some additional information right there. Next, we go down to this really nifty for loop. So this for loop is basically taking everything else that's after the ones we know. We know we're passing args 0 through 4. The rest of them are question marks, 5 and up, right? So the first thing we do is we set the first thing at 5. So iterates from 5 to total number of arguments sent to function. Right? If there were only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments into function, then there is no getArg5, and this for loop would just die. If there was another set, it would go through, etc., etc. So what it's doing here is it's starting at 5. You'll see that it's going to the total number of arguments. And you'll see also the interesting thing here is we're skipping by 2. And the reason we're skipping by 2 is simply because, remember how I said we're doing things in a set. The first item is going to be the reward ID, or the required ID. The second one's going to be the item amount. So those two kind of act as one. So they're going to go through one iteration together. After that, we're going to skip to the next set by passing two indexes because we're skipping the next one. All right. So the first thing we do again is another check. Simply get item name equals null, just to make sure that the required item actually exists. All right. That's simple enough. If it doesn't exist, it debugs a message and saying that it was skipped. If it does exist, we're adding to the .@j array. Now this part is pretty interesting. So the .@j array, again, the first iteration, our .@i is 5, right? So .@i is 5, minus 2 is 3. And you'll notice we haven't got to 3 yet, so that's why we start at 3 here. So this sets .@j 3, or if you wanted to, 5 minus 2, right? And it stores the values getArg. This will store getArg 5 and getArg 6. And those are evaluated. You're actually storing .@j 3 to getArg 5, which is, if you look up top, getArg 5 is the first required item, number 1. And then .@j 4 equals getArg 6, which is number of required item, number 1. And then that's why we skip by 2, because then we're going to go to item number 2, required item, and a number of required items. So this is a pretty interesting little setup here, because it's basically just adding onto this J array all the required items. The interesting thing, to be quite honest with you, is that all it really did was delete these 2 elements out of the getArgs. So you probably could have just done that in itself, but it's okay, because the way he has it works, and we're just going through exactly how he has it. So the next part is one of my favorite commands in the whole scripting language, and this includes getD paired with getD, setD. Those are my favorite commands in the world. So what he's doing here is he's copying the array. He's copying the .@j array right here, starting at 0, and he's copying the entire array because he's using the entire getArray index or getArray size. But he's storing it into a compounded variable, and you see that because there's variables within the compound name. So what's happening here is getD is taking hello, or let's say dot hello, and then +1 plus world, and turning that into a variable to be .hello1 underscore world, and then storing the value. You can do the same thing with arrays, so you can put the colon at the end of it right there, or the 0 right there if you wanted to, and make that into an array. And the script engine wouldn't know any difference. It would seem like it could just put in this without putting all of this really nifty functions. So getD is an awesome command, especially when you're dealing with dynamics and wanting to create dynamic arrays based on anything, really. So what this variable is doing is this variable is creating a variable called .q underscore getArg1, which is, again, the shop index that we talked about earlier, so we'll stay with 1. Our getArg1 is our item ID that we're getting, so we're getting 55022, and we're starting an array index 0, and then we're putting basically everything that .@j that we just created here. So we're putting all of .@j for item 5022. And this is what I was talking about earlier. These variables are stored on the MPC through the lifetime of the script, not lifetime of the script, lifetime of the MPC on the server. And if you use the same item in the same shop, this will just overwrite because the variable is the same. But if we were to put 5022 in shop 2, again, you'll notice the variable is different. It doesn't matter. As long as it's not in the same shop, it's okay to use. So that is what that's doing, and all that's doing is basically just putting all that extra information together so that when we look up this variable information, we'll have all that information available to us to know exactly what we need to request. Okay, so the next part, NPC shop add item. This is simply adding adding items to the shop. We don't know what shop we're doing, but we can go by the index of shop ID. So this is where those queue shops come in. We're adding an item to a shop at queue shop argument, which is going to be 1, 2, or 3. We're adding the value, the item get arg1, which is the 5022 reward item, and then we basically say we're using one of those basic variables. If dot shows any 1 or 0. If it's 1, show the any value. If it's 2, or if it's 0, show the 0 value. Very simple stuff. So I'll put a comment here too. This is just adds the item to the shop. Happy face. All right. So now let's go back to the top, and we're going to go back to where we were when we saw all those ads. So here we are. So this is that's all that we did there. And again, he did a lot of stuff with the copy arrays, etc., and that's most likely why he used free loop, turned free loop on, because you never know how much stuff people are going to put in these things. So we're going to leave that alone, and you'll see at the very bottom, right after all this stuff, free loop is turned back on, which basically enables infinite loop check from here on out, or until next free loop one. And again, this could be also known as free loop. I'll put at the bottom here. This could also be free loop false. And that just basically puts it back on, tells it after this stuff we want to put it back on, that way we don't screw up anything else. No big deal there. All right, the last part of this on it, keep in mind, this is all stuff that's happening as soon as the server loads into the script. As soon as the script loads into the server. Nice twist there, huh? This is all the stuff that's happening as soon as the NPC loads. None of this has anything to do with you clicking the NPC or anything like that. This is just stuff that's done behind the scenes and getting prepared to show the player later on. So the next thing is we're creating the basic menu for what's going to happen. And this is, again, based on the shops. The first thing we do is just set .add menu to an empty string, and then we start looping through. We loop through from 1 to the total number of items in the .shops $sign array. And again, those items are right here. I'm going to copy and paste them down here so you can see them. I'll put them in a comment, so don't worry about that. So we're basically going to loop through this array, starting at 1, 1, 2, 3. So when the first iteration equals 1, dot menu $sign equals nothing, because again right now menu equals nothing, plus the value of .shops $sign at index 1, which is headgears. So plus headgears, and then we're going to add plus, you see right here, a colon, and that colon is used for a select statement, so we're going to go through that in a second. Next iteration of 2, dot menu $sign now equals headgears with a colon plus the value of weapons plus a colon. And the third iteration of dot menu $sign equals equals headgears, weapons, and then plus other plus colon. The last colon doesn't matter, select statement, it's just kind of omitted. So the trailing colon is okay to have at the end. And finally, when this menu is created, the last thing we do is we delete this item that's in the shop from each shop. And you'll notice at the very bottom, I'll scroll back down one more time, you'll see these shops are created with the dummy item 909. You have to have an item in your shop in order to create it, so they just created a dummy item, they added all the new items they want to add, and they just kill this item afterwards. No big deal. So let's go back up. Again, so we delete the item, right? Delete dummy item from shops. And then our shops are set. And finally at the end, dot menu $sign equals headgears, weapons, other, colon. So that gives us the final menu that we're going to be dealing with in the next phase. So now that we know how everything works as far as how the shops are created, how the information is added to the shops, we need to see what the original NPC actually is doing now. Give me one more second. So we're going to go right back up to the top, and you'll see that first thing. The first NPC, the very first thing they do is they call this function called QShop. That's located at the very bottom of the script, so I'm going to super scroll down. Here we go. Uh-oh. Hold on 1 second. I need to fix something for my job. Okay, so we talked about going to find the QShop. This QShop is at the very bottom of the script. We're going to get there in just 1 second. Let's do 1 more second. Okay, so QShop. This is located at the very bottom. You'll see it right here. QShop. And this is a very simple idea. But what it's doing is it's actually compounding information so that it can be later shown. So the first thing it does is deletes this character array. The character numeric array called @I. And it deletes the entire array because it's using get array size starting at 0, so it's deleting the entire array. And it's just simply deleting it. And this is because it's a character variable, you never know if it gets deleted or not, or if anything overwrites and doesn't get changed. And one of the reasons why he is using character variables is because he's inside of a function outside of an NPC script and needs to be able to transfer that information back and forth. So using the active character makes most perfect sense. So we'll continue with that. So what we're doing here is this is where I told you that the arguments you can pass to QShop. Remember call function QShop, you can pass nothing, right? Leave it as alone. Call function QShop and pass in 1, 2. Or you can call function QShop and just pass in 1, no big deal. We'll put those in order so you can see what happens. Alright, so by calling QShop with nothing, correct, there won't be a value of this at all. So @I will have no array size because it doesn't exist. You deleted it already and you didn't pass anything to go through the loop, so @I equals blank, right? So this would be @I equals nothing, and so get array size of @I equals 0. If you passed 1 argument to it, you would set this, it would go from 0 to total args, which would be 1, so it would be 1 loop, right? And you would set @I at 0 to be the value of get @arg, the first one, 0, which would be 1. So @I would equal array 1, and it would get array size of @I equals 1. Same thing with this one. If you do this, you'll do it loop twice, right? @I equals 1 and 2, and get array size @I equals 2. So that's just simply how it's doing it. It's creating a character array that's storing the shop indexes on the character so that the shop will know which ones you're trying to display. It's very interesting. So again, 0 means all. You can pass 1 shop, you can pass multiple shops, or you can just pass nothing and do all shops. And next we go to the do event. We use do event, not do NPC event, because we want to continue to keep the character attached. So we use a do event, we call it Quest Shop NPC, and we go to the subfunction on menu. So let's go on back up. Alright, so here's on menu. The first thing we do with this thing is we check the size of that array that we just talked about. So again, if we pass no arguments, then array size equals 0. Pass 1 argument equals array size equals 1, and then we can pass n arguments, and I'm saying n because it can be any number arguments, then array size equals n, right? Because if you pass 2 arguments, then array size is 2. This is what this function is checking for. So the first thing that happens, let's assume we check and see if there's no array size at all. So if there's not a size, then we set the shop index to be the value selected at a menu. Now this menu select is really cool. So this menu select is going to select from the original menu that we created, which is going to give them 3 options, right? This menu will give them 3 options here, and these values, when selected, are going to be 1, 2, 3. Select is not based on an array index, but it starts at 1. So the very first one you select is actually the value 1 returned. Same with weapons, same with other. You get to 2, you get to 3. So we're setting the shop index to be whatever they select from the original menu, and since they're in order 1, 2, 3, then we know that if they select the first item in the menu, they're really selecting the headgear shop, and the headgear shop is really index 1. Let's go to the next part of this. That's only if there's no array size at all. They only pass one argument. If they pass one argument to the call QShop array, if size equals 1, then we don't even need to show a menu because there's only one shop they can show, the one we told it to show. So at shop index will simply be whatever index you passed. So if you passed 1, then whenever they open this MPC, they would open up that shop directly. If you passed 3, they would open up the shop 3 directly. They wouldn't have to ask what kind of menu they wanted because, you're not giving them a choice. You're just telling them this is the shop. Last is the cool function, the little dynamic one. And what this is doing is this taking a lot of interesting things here. So first we're going to loop through from 0 to the size of the array, and we're actually going less than the size, so it's pretty much size minus 1. And we're incrementing by 1 because there's one we want to increment by. We're setting a value of at menu, which is another temporary variable that we're setting basically to itself, just like we did the original menu. And what he didn't do here, but you could do at the same time, is .at menu equals colon. Just like he did up here, set menu. Oh, sorry, let's do it how you did. Set menu, comma. You don't have to do this because it's a temporary variable and it's just created right there on the fly. But if you really wanted to make sure it was there, you could set that in front. So what he's doing is the exact same thing we did before up there, but this time we're only looping through the number of arguments in the at I array, the index array that we created when we first called QShop. So again, this depends on what we passed to QShop. So we're going to do a few iterations of this depending on, and we're just going to show you what happens when we pass certain things. So let's assume we passed 2 arguments. Passed 2 arguments, and we passed in shops 1 and 3. Right? So we called call function QShop 1, 3. Right? All right. So we did this. So what happens is now at I 0 equals 1 and at I 1 equals 3 because these are the 2 items we passed in. This also means this is the headgear shop and this is the other shop because we're skipping the weapon shop because we're not passing store ID 2, shop ID 2. So how are we getting that information? So the menu is setting to itself plus, and this is really crazy here, we're taking the shops array, but instead of just getting it at an index, we're getting it at the index based on the character array. So we're taking the character array inside here and getting the first 0 of this loop. Because remember, we're looping 2 times right here, right? We're looping 0 for J at 1 at J, and then we're looping at 1 for at J because at J is going through the array size, 0 to 1. So at I 0 equals 1, so we're getting the value of the word at the shops array at index 1, which is headgears. Then we're doing another loop, and we're going to use at J as 1, and then we're going to get at I equals 3, and then we're going to get dot shops $ array at 3, which is other. And that will give us the menu headgears other, just like that. Now the interesting thing about this though is that we need to know, even though we're not the order looks the same, right? We're going to see when they do select, we're going to only see this. I'm going to copy down here. If you remember correctly, we're going to see 1 and 2 because that's the way select works. But if you notice, 2 is not the index of other. 3 is the index of other, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, it's very simple. We're going to take that value of select right here, of whatever they chose here, and we're going to subtract 1 by it. If we subtract 1 by it, that's going to give us 0 and 1, right? Because we subtracted 1. Now, if you notice, those zeros and ones exist right down here. So instead of taking just the value, we're now taking @I to the value of the select statement subtracted by 1 to get us the value of the index of the @I array. And when we do so, the @I array will actually give us the correct shop ID 1 or 3. And that is what we're going to store to our shop index. And by doing so now, no matter what we've done, whether we selected all shops, one shop, or any number of shops, we've always set shop@index to be the correct value of the index based in this array. Whoa, right? I know, pretty trippy, huh? Alright, so that's going to give us some cool stuff. So let's see what happens next. So next, we go ahead and get rid of this array. Get rid of @I array, no longer needed. Right? So let's just get rid of it. We delete it. That's cool. Next, we check and see, does that shop even exist? Frankly, I think this check needs to be somewhere higher up in the chain, but it's here anyway. We're just going to leave it there. And the reason why I say that is because technically we've already determined this value right here equals quote quote when we created the menu, and when we created the menu up here at the top. So we probably should have checked if the menu existed up here, but we checked it down here. So not a horrible ordeal, just something to note. So this is, does the shop exist? We'll assume it does. And then he says this down here, select one item at a time. And the reason for this, I'm assuming, is because I didn't see in the script that he goes through each item that you purchase, so you can only select one item at a time. If you try to select multiple items, it's only going to count for the first item in the list. So, not that I worry about it, but that's just what it does. So, follow instructions, right? You can always try to update the script yourself. I can show you how later, but as of right now, we just follow the instructions. Next, what he's doing is calling a Q shop, which is those shops at the very bottom of our script, and we're calling it at the shop index because now we know which shop we actually want to show, and we're calling it in the, I never get this right. I consider it the selling menu, but in reality, it's the buying menu because the character is buying items. To me, it would be more like the NPC is selling items, but in reality, that's what it is. So, call shop 1, character is buying items, or the NPC is selling items, however you look at it. And we're attaching, we're calling that shop so that the shop displays, and then we're attaching the shop to this NPC so that we can trigger the commands, or the I guess sub-functions, I don't know what they call them, when something happens, such as the next item on by item. So we're attaching the script shop to the script, and we're stopping there because we've shown the shop. Let the character do something now. So that's the next part. Finally, so far what we've gotten so far is we've gotten the dynamic menu, we've gotten the shop to open, we've gotten pretty much everything we've gotten up until the point where the character actually tries to purchase the item. So I'm going to go away for a second and I need to look some information up, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now, one thing we really need to learn is get item info. Alright, so next we're going to go through the on-buy item. So this is what happens. Basically, the shop's displayed to the character. So now whenever the character tries to purchase an item, we need to know what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is, what's next? There's a lot of crazy stuff you see you got here going into this. And he's used a lot of variables that really don't make any sense, but work. So we're going to go through, excuse me one second, each of those and determine how and why they're used. So the first thing we do is he's setting this .q array, and you can see he's kind of just displayed it a little bit and showing how it works here. And what it is basically another version of that .@j array and all sorts of fun stuff. So the first thing we do is at q, we start at 0, and the first thing we do is put the item that they're trying to purchase. And again, this is why only the first item works, is because he's only getting the first item of the array. He's not looping through all the bought items. He's only using the first one. Now you could, if you wanted to, loop all of this into one big array using free loop, but I don't recommend it. There's no telling how many items somebody might try to buy, and it can screw up the whole thing. So the first thing he does is get the item reward, right? And then he determines how much they're purchasing. Again, this becomes one of those variables, max stack, how many they're allowed to purchase at one time. So if the bought quantity was greater than the total number we allowed, then we make it the max allowed, and then if it's not, then we make it the bought quantity. And that basically gives us Q0 and Q1. We skip Q2 because we're actually going to be using a calculation for that after we do this Q3. So what we do now is we set Q3 to be everything from that cool, crazy Q get D array. And we basically take the entire array, copy it to Q3 plus, and do it from 3. So we get 3 plus all the information from that from the entire array. So that gives us everything that .@j originally held, and it held the reward amount, the reward amount. I don't know why he has base amount here, because it's not really a base amount. Let's just go look at that real quick and double check that, but I'm pretty sure that didn't have what he thinks it had in there. Oh, maybe base amount is how much we're actually getting. So no, I have no idea what the base amount is. I don't think that actually exists. But what we're doing is we're getting the everything else that's in there: number of Zenny, number of cash points, every required item, plus the number of items it can be. I'm actually going to nix this because I don't think base amount actually exists in there. Oh, okay, I know what he's doing here. Don't worry about this. So this is part of what it's adding in when Q2 gets added in. When Q2 gets added in, you'll notice it's a calculation. It's Q1, which is the purchased amount, the amount the character tried to purchase, and then it's multiplied by Q3, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, the base amount, which is basically how many rewards each shop item equals. So if you remember when we added, we said that we added to shop 1, we added 5022, and we added one of those items. So if they wanted to trade for one of those items and they try to purchase 10 from the shop, they would trade 10 times. If they were trying, if let's say each one of those was worth 5 items and you made one trade, then it's one trade to 5 items. So if you made 3 trades, you try to purchase 3 of those items, you would actually be getting back 15 items. And that's where the reward amount comes into play, because reward amount is the actual amount they're receiving versus the base amount being how many each item is worth in the shop. So that's where Q2 is. He does a little hard function here. Don't quite know why this is hard-coded. I personally don't like hard codes. I would use a variable. When I say a variable, I would say, dot, let's see, max items or something like that, max item count, something crazy, instead of 30,000. But basically, if they didn't try to purchase any, or .@Q2, which is the reward amount, was greater than 30,000, then you basically tell them you can't do it. Sorry, and kill the script. Again, I don't know why, but that's what it is. It's what it's there, so I'm not even going to worry about it. All right, next. Again, some of this stuff's very basic. This is just message statements. Not going to worry about that. Disable items. You can look this up on the rAthena script commands, but what this does is prevents players from changing equipment while talking to NPC. That's simplistic enough, right? All right, next we're doing a little bit of settings. This is where that check value comes in. So the first thing it's going to say is if Q4, which Q4 was going to be the required zenny amount, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Required zenny. Let's just go up here so you can see. I'm going to put some numbers up here. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is going to be 6, 7, plus, plus, because there's going to be multiples there, right? So Q4 is required zenny, so it's going to check the value of the current zenny to, and this is again a calculation, to the value, and remember this is just an A and B check, to at Q4, which is the number of zenny required per each item, multiplied by the number trying to be purchased. And it's going to check that value, right? So it's going to do that check, and that check is going to return. Now let's go back to that check function. It's a really simple function. A check function is going to take get args 1 and 2. So get arg 0 equals quantity have, right? Get arg 1 equals quantity needed. And so it's going to check, do you have less than the quantity needed? If you do, it's going to set at QE0 to 1, and it's going to return the character color, the color hex red. Else it's going to return the color hex green. I remember R, G, B. So at full R is red, full G is green. So the check is simply returning a string, that, and if it is fails, it's going to set an at QE variable to 0, at QE array index 0 to 1. And we'll get into that one later. So this check is going to basically return either, and it's going to show how much zenny. So this plus value right here is adding the exact same number here than the quantity needed zenny, right? So it's going to say, do you have 1,000 zenny, green or red? Okay. The same thing happens with cash points. And you'll notice the get D cash points is actually using the points value 0, which is basically saying get D, the variable called hashtag cash points. And it's going to send, since it's using get D, it's not going to send the string hashtag cash points. It's going to send the value of hashtag cash points to, and then the check function, and they're going to send the same thing, how much cash points per item multiplied by the number of items trying to be purchased, and then show that number of cash points needed, plus the word cash points, and then it's doing a whole bunch of calculations. Get D cash points divided by, so basically how many cash points you have right here to the number of cash points needed, and since it's using the check function, it's going to color it either red or green. Next, again, we're starting at 6, and the reason we're starting at 6 is if you go to the very top of this function, you'll notice required item and required amount are 6, 7 combos. So we start at 6 for our array, so we know how many items required, and we do the whole bunch of cool checks. Again, we skip by 2 because we're doing a key value pair, and we're going through the rest of the array size of .IQ. So the first thing, must check count item of how many items you have at that array index. So .q for .i, which is the first value of the 6, and then you're checking against the number of items you have, or the number of items you should have, which is at I plus 1, which is the amount needed, times the number of you're trying to purchase. So I'm going to check that and return either red or green, and set that variable at QE0 to 1 if you don't have enough. If the variable show ID is on, then it's going to show what that ID is. Nothing fancy there. If not, it shows nothing. And then it's going to go to this new slot function. The slot function is down at the bottom again. We're going to go down there and we'll come back to 185 in a second. Slot. So the slot function takes the item ID and gets the item name, just store it, .add $. Sorry, nothing fancy there. If, and it says not get item slots of the item ID, so basically if the item doesn't have slots, then just return the string name. We don't care, right? Return name of item. Then next one, get item info, get arg02 equals 4, or get item info, get arg2 equals 5. And I'm going to double check real quick what those mean. I have no idea why we're using 4 I'm sorry, 2. Never mind. Type. That's type. So if type is equals to 4 or type equals to 5, then I guess we know it has slots. I don't really know what types mean, but I'm sure there's a way to find out. And you're going to return the string with the number of slots it has. Very simple. And if you put 0, then you're going to return the string just by returning the name of the item. So all that's doing is basically either returning, all it's saying is return potion, red potion, or return red potion 4 slots. I mean, that's basically it. Very simple. All right, back to line 185. So again, we're checking the count, we're showing the ID or not, we're showing the name of the item, and we're again showing how many you have versus how many you need. And since we're using the check function, we're going to color code that either red or green. Finally, we're going to hit a next page, and we're going to do next. All right, so we get that far, and we have all this information. Now we need to see what happens. Right? So we set at QE1 to get item info 5 and 11. Now 5 and 11, that is the 5 is, I'm going to double check my information here, lock or location, and 11 is view. I have no idea. I'm honestly sorry, I don't know what that means. But we have it there. I'm assuming that's a 0 or a 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know per se. But it's there. 5 is location, and that location is going to be where it's actually equipped at. So that part's easy. I don't know what 11 means, but I'm sure it means something. It has a greater than or equal to 0 or greater than 0, so I'm assuming it's a positive number higher than 0. So if that Q2 is greater than 0 and QE1 is equal to, and it's one of these equipped gears, right? Boom. Then you can preview it. You're allowed to preview. And that's basically, I guess, saying if the item that you're retrieving is a visible type of item that you can display, then we want to let you preview it. If not, then there's no reason to preview it because you can't see it. It's like putting on a pair of shoes. You can't see it. No reason to display it, right? All right. And then we put an add timer on the character. I don't know what this part is for. I'm assuming because I really don't know why that's on there right away, because we do the change look in a little bit. But it's there. You put the timer on the NPC to call on end. What all end does is basically just revert your look back to normal. But after that timer's set, we go straight into the while loop. So I don't think this matters. Could be wrong. But since the while loop does all this, there may be some way of getting out of it, which is why the timer is there. I don't believe it's needed. So the while loop. While loop has a small select statement. There's only 2 options in it. So the first one is select, and it says purchase, and it shows the item name that you're purchasing. The next item, if it exists, if at preview and not QE7, what QE7 is going to be is that you're already previewing the item, and we'll show that in a second. Then you can preview the item, and it shows, or else it doesn't show anything. And then finally you can cancel. All right. So again, since select starts at 1, the first option case is purchase, and we're going to see what happens. So if at Q equals 0, that means, remember we talked about that, the check function right down here at the bottom, the check function sets QE0 to 1 if there was no items found, or if there was not enough items. So if that QE has a value, it's not 0, right? Then you missed an item, and it tells you, hey, you're missing those items, close. It doesn't tell you which ones you're missing, which could be kind of neat. But they probably should have seen it when they saw the requirements with the red and green. So they tried to trick the system, and the system said no. Next, it does a check weight function. You got to check the weight to make sure they can carry what they're about to get. So you check the weight against the item versus how many they should get, and determine if they can carry that, and it shows everything else. And if it doesn't, it does a bunch of calculations to show how much weight you need, and blah, blah, blah. That stuff, you can figure this out. Lastly, it keeps going. If there's any requirements, then it sets any and subtracts any. If there's cache requirements, it sets, again, you see set D Again, set D is exactly the same as get D. The only difference is you're setting the variable. So your set D, the variable name cache points, hashtag cache points, to get D of hashtag cache points minus this total sum of how many cache points it's going to require. It's most likely going to be 0. And then finally, you have to go through each array, starting at 6, going through all the items by 2 to get each required item and each required item amount times the amount purchased, and delete those items. And since we've already done all the checks for count item, we're okay. And then finally, you get item, you get the reward item, and you get it at the amount purchased. If .announce is on, then it announces that it happened, and blah, 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 blah. It shows a special effect, yay, and closes. Yahoo, you did it. If you hit select preview, case 2, you have set array at QE3, and it basically sets the rest of at QE to the original look for the rope. So basically, what your head was, what your top was, mid was, what your robe was. And the last one is 1, and it's basically just saying you're currently in preview mode. So if at QE1 and 1, and these are all bitwise characters or binary characters to figure out which look it's on. And that's basically stuff you'll have to look up. I'm not going to go over all that, but it's there. And it's basically saying if it's in this spot, change this to look to that. If it's in this spot, change this look to that, etc., etc. And this is where you get at QE7, because at QE7 right here would be 1. And it's basically saying that you're currently in preview mode. And then finally, if you hit cancel, you're closed. So that is all of everything that Euphy script does. Very awesome script. I give them mad props for it. Definitely a dynamic shop. I love dynamics. If you have any questions regarding this, please let me know. Don't mind answering questions, but it was great. Thanks, guys.